To call Independent School District 721 to order. Janelle, please note that all 7 school board members are here. Let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance to start us off.
First.
Or do we have to, yeah, let's do that. Okay.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It took me all but 4 seconds to go out of order already, so
What are you doing to me?
I know. So we'll start off by welcoming Jean Schmidt to the board. You have to do your oath of office. So, John, you said you want us in a certain position, so you can stand while we, even from your own spot right here. So, yep. And then raise your right hand. And so I'll try to do my best to repeat, so you can repeat me. So, here's the oath of office. I swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state,
of the United States,
and that I will discharge faithfully the duties
and that I will discharge
of the office of school board member,
of the office of school,
Independent School District 721,
independent school
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Congratulations. All right, now we have the roll call. All 7 members are present, Janelle. We said the Pledge of Allegiance. We now move to the open forum portion of our meeting. We have one, and I'll just read our initial statement that we always have. But good evening. Thank you for joining us for the school board meeting of District 721. Meetings are recorded and can be viewed by accessing the school board page on the district website. If you have submitted an online request to speak during open forum, you were notified earlier in the day of the amount of time that you will be able to have. In this case, we just have one. Please be advised that the board will not respond to your topic at this meeting. If your comment requires follow-up, the board chair, myself, or the administration will get back to you as appropriate. So, Lindsay Wires, you're the one speaker we have today.
All 30 minutes, right? I'm just kidding. Okay. And tell me if I need to be closer. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. Movement is medicine for our mind and body. Of course, there are physical benefits of FIED, but what about mental health, emotional health, social benefits of learning to work with others and teamwork, sportsmanship, academic benefits that have been studied and closely related to physical activity, lengthened attention spans? I could go on and on about why our children need movement and the benefits behind it. But what I just want to say is cutting FIED to 41 days in an academic year will have a detrimental effect on their social, emotional, behavioral development, and their mental health. I don't know a single person in this boardroom who would say, we put students first, while also having this be an option. Last year, the Minnesota 988 Lifeline Centers answered over 30,000 calls, a 154% increase from the year before. 30,000 people in the state of Minnesota who are struggling with suicidal thoughts. Scientifically, exercise causes our brains to release endorphins and serotonin that help improve our moods. Cutting FIED to 41 days a year doesn't affect just a small population of our students. This decision would negatively affect every single K-5 student in the district, and I'm terrified of what this would do to the children moving forward, especially in regards to mental health and obesity. I sat next to my dad's bedside 7 years ago in the ICU after he attempted suicide, and I don't want to do that with my children. They need to move their bodies, not just for their physical health, but for their mental health. Whew. My emotions aside, I don't think I need to hammer down the benefits of movement and the benefits that it has on our children in regards to mental and physical health. This room is filled with well-educated professionals who I'm pretty certain know all of the benefits already. I do want to share some findings that support why this isn't the only option and why this should not be an option at all. FIED has about 240 benchmarks that fall under the Minnesota state standards in which they need to get through every single year. After speaking with the state FIED rep, time allocated to PE should be enough to allow students to be able to meet the benchmarks within the standards. These specific minor budget items This specific minor budget item does not allow enough time for our K-5 students to meet the benchmarks that fall under the Minnesota state standards. Releasing an article to the New Prague Times stating it can be confirmed the FIED teachers can meet these standards in 41 days is not accurate information that is being released to the community. I believe this disinformation was deliberately intended to mislead the board and the community into thinking this is a reasonable cut and students can meet the standards in that amount of time, when in reality, it's not reasonable or a possible demand of the FIED teachers or our students. Fewer and fewer districts in the state of Minnesota still have media for a few reasons. Media does not have a single state standard. We are already teaching a lot of the media skills in the classroom. As a former 3rd and 4th grade teacher in the district, I can confidently say that I was already teaching a love of literature in the classroom. STEM standards are embedded into our science standards, and I was teaching them in the classroom already. Things like coding, snap circuits, engineering are all being done in the classroom and can be done in the classroom. FIED cannot be done in the classroom. I've sat through the budget meetings. I've had countless conversations with parents, administrators, teachers. I have done my research, and the justifications for why we are looking at cutting FIED are simply we're working hard and this is a tough situation. These do not justify why this is the best and only option for our students. There are other options. Digging your heels in just because a decision is inconvenient to the administrators isn't what's best for our students. I understand that putting the media teachers in the classroom because all 3 of them have K-6 licenses isn't convenient for our administrators. I get that. But it is a much better option than cutting movement for all K-5 students. Lastly, the proposal of cutting 3 FIED teachers for a listed $240,000 doesn't tell the whole story. The elementary FIED teachers are already teaching district DAPE students. Buying into a DAPE grant for $120,000 this upcoming year when DAPE is already being taught in and provided in the current PE structure isn't the best use of our money in this very moment. All 5 PE teachers currently have their DAPE license and have been teaching DAPE for over a decade in our district. The only one who doesn't is the classroom teacher who was put in to teach FIED. I'm asking for the board to not approve this cut in the budget. It is not the only option. It's being considered because it's an easier option for administrators. It's not what's best for our students. And if you need more time as a board, please push the decision back until the April board meeting. Keep our students' well-being at the center of these difficult decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I would entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
And first and second, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 7-0. I would also entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move. Second.
And first and second, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 7-0. All right, the board committees. First off, we have the Southwest Metro Intermediate District. Denny.
Yes, I have 2 meetings I attended that I was not able to give a report for. So the first one occurred on February the 20th. And at that meeting, we had a presentation by the FFA director for Southwest Metro. And he presented really a nice program that they have. It's on drones. And drones, you might say, well, does that really fit into agriculture? And it really does. There are many uses of drones in agriculture. And they also had a competition, and the Southwest Metro kids did a very good job, I think, finishing something like second in the competition of the drones. So that was a very cool thing, I thought. They also talked about the budget and how it's going. We had a presentation, and the financial results are looking good for the district. We have a nice amount of surplus that we are using, that we're saving for our rainy day, and hopefully that rainy day doesn't come to Southwest Metro. We did talk about donations that we received, and we also had the negotiations met in a strategy in a closed session, and the purpose of that was to plan for the next session that happened on March 4th with the mediator. And that turned out to be a very fruitful meeting, and we came to a conclusion that we would be able to accept the contract from the board standpoint, and the teachers did the same, and we have a contract that has been approved by both parties. So that was a very good thing. It didn't happen without cutbacks or some belt tightening in the Southwest Metro budget. We did have several areas where we took a look at our budget and took some cuts in some of the programs and some of the personnel that we had on board that we had to let go. But none of the teachers lost any of the positions. All the teachers were able to be reassigned from any of the programs that might have had a cutback. So we got it done, and we had a settlement that was, I believe, like 9.4%, including steps and lanes. So it was considered a very fair settlement, both by the administration, the superintendents, and by the board as well. And we also had some very good news. We got a couple of very nice grants for a couple of our programs that the staff at Southwest Metro worked hard to get, and will help the students in that respect. And then we also had another meeting last Tuesday, and at that one we had a presentation by the person that was in charge of the Alternative Learning Center. We have an Alternative Learning Center here in our school, and many school districts do, but we also offer one through Southwest Metro for students that just for some reason or another can't maintain their good status at their home district. And that gives students a chance to earn credits and get on board to the level of being able to graduate when they get completed with their program. So the program is very good and very worthwhile as far as our students are concerned. Let me see what else. We did pass the contract. We did take a vote on that.
Any out of curiosity, what was the increases? Or was the
Not-
highlights of the contract?
Well, basically, we didn't do a lot of language changing. Most of it had to, insurance was a big part. Our employees in Southwest Metro are in two categories. We have the teachers, and then we have all the rest of the employees. And the rest of the employees have a program that is very satisfactory. It seems like it is not as expensive as the program that the teachers have selected. And because of that, it's called PEEP. It's one that's available to all teachers throughout the state, and it's not a very cheap program, and once you get into it, it's hard to get opt out of it. So we worked out a situation where the teachers will be able to opt out of it in the coming years, and hopefully be able to get on board with the other employees' contracts as far as the insurance is concerned, and hopefully we'll save some money for the teachers and make it more palatable for the administration as well. Thanks for asking. And I think that pretty much takes care of it.
Okay. How about CPAC?
CPAC had a meeting that was virtual on the 20th of February as well. And at that meeting, we highlighted the Duck Cup. And the Duck Cup is a organization that promotes mental health, suicide prevention. And our students were given the opportunity to participate in several presentations that were given during the fall of this past year in the elementary school, middle school, and senior high as well. And we just can't say enough to the Duck Cup organization for allowing our students to have that presentation about mental health that they were given. We also are looking at plans for the future for this coming school year, and hopefully we'll be able to do another presentation for students dealing with mental health issues. We looked at some of the things that the members of CPAC, parents that is, are interested in covering as far as maybe speakers or some type of program that we could offer for them. A couple of the things that we talked about were speech and language communication, behaviors, proactive teaching strategies, mental health, and revisiting executive functioning. And we will continue working on finding some of the areas that we could present to the parents and also maybe to staff as well in some of these areas. And I think that took care of it.
Okay, thank you. Community ed?
Community ed and early learning are going to be combined because I attend both.
Got it.
Community ed, the catalog is online, and it'll be coming out on April 1st. There's a new highlight in there where they check out interviews in the school feature to check out. Early learning, they went over the budget presentation, and program changes are limited transportation, and their popular class is the nature-based class, which is full for next year. Also on community ed side, senior shuttle starting May 7th. It'll be available Tuesdays from 10 to 1. People will have to call the community ed office by Monday at noon if they need the service. Facility use agreement with Mantis Swim Club is going well, and the Area Education Foundation Student Art Show was on March 21st, and I understand that second time went well too. I didn't get to attend this year. I did last year though. And Music at the Bras this summer, 8 weeks, 8 times this year, this summer.
Perfect, thank you. Joint powers?
So attended my first meeting of Joint Powers. It was mostly an organizational meeting is the main highlight. The chair was, I believe, reappointed, which is Sandy, Sandy Loxton, and then Dwayne Jarek got appointed as the vice chair.
Okay. That's a handoff from Karen to Dan, so, okay. Thank you. Equity Committee?
Nothing.
Okay, and then District Advisory Committee?
No meeting.
Okay. All right, that takes care of the committee reports. Now moving on to Superintendent update.
I'll keep my remarks somewhat short today because we know we have a lot to discuss, but I wanted to, Mrs. Holden stole my thunder. I was able to attend the second annual Arts and Activities Showcase on Thursday evening at the Park Ballroom. Thank you to Mr. Boothie as well as the members of the New Prague Education Foundation for the work that they put in. Really a neat event where student artwork and performances and a lot of great things happening and people coming and going throughout what was a very busy night. And so thank you to everyone for organizing that. And then I just want to thank our staff for their work that they have done leading up to spring break. These have been some challenging times filled with lots of emotions and uncertainty, but yet our staff continues to step up to the plate to meet the needs of our students, the academic and social emotional needs of all of our students. And so they deserve a well-deserved spring break, whether it's our licensed staff, our administrators, our non-licensed staff. They've been doing really, really good things in some challenging times. So I want to acknowledge the work of our staff and hope that they get some rest and relaxation in the next couple of days.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is the reports and discussion items, which we just have the first reading of policies.
That's me. I am new on the policy committee, so we're going to organize first reading of policies the way we had discussed in our board evaluation meeting with Gail from MSBA. What'll happen when we introduce the first reading is that I'll introduce each policy and then ask each member if they have any questions or need any clarification of wording or meaning. And then I will bring that needed information back to our work session the next time where we can openly discuss each policy. And then we'll have a second reading where we can actually discuss them with all the information at the following board meeting. So that's the new protocol.
Got it.
Okay.
So for clarification,
Yep.
so we're going to bring it here for first meeting, then we're going to the work session to discuss in depth, and then second reading back at the next meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
one of the reasons we decided to do that was because if we take a first reading, there's so many questions sometimes that we don't have time to gather information on. So hopefully we can go from here to gathering information and then discuss it at the work session and then bring it back for a second reading
Okay.
at a board meeting. Okay. If I've got this right, we start with 401, equal opportunity. That's policy 401. Note that the only change is the addition of the words "for all" under Roman numeral 1 purpose. And if you looked under Roman numeral 2A, you'll see that this makes it consistent with the first line of Roman numeral 2A, where it states for all for applicants. Okay, that's the only change that's going to be made. I guess I'd be open to any questions or clarifications that anybody would need for 401. Denny? No. Matt? Mark? Kim?
No.
Dan?
I'm good.
All right, one done. 403, donation of sick leave. Note that there are no proposed changes to this policy. Anybody have any questions or any clarification, any information that you need? Dan?
None for me.
Kim?
No.
Mark?
Nope.
Matt?
No.
Jean? Danny? Good to go. 403F is the sick leave consent form, which is what the staff member would have to fill out in order to gain the sick leave. Again, there is no proposed changes to this policy. Questions, clarification, any information that you need, Denny? No. Jean?
No.
Matt?
Nope.
Mark?
No.
Kim?
No.
Dan?
Nope.
Right. 735 is school district credit card. There are no proposed changes to that policy. I'll ask for any questions, clarifications, or other information that you might need. Dan?
None for me.
Kim?
No.
Mark?
Nope.
Matt?
No.
None.
Good to go. I think I got all of them, am I right?
Yes.
Done. All right.
Those were easy ones.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so now we're moving to the section of our meeting of action items where we have to take votes and work through any discussion on them. So first on this section is the approval of the final planning for success budget reductions. I know Andy and Sandy will be presenting here.
Mine aren't either.
Chair, board chair, members of the board, members of the community, I offer up the presentation that you have seen several times leading up to our decision today, the decisions and discussions that need to be made tonight. I wavered a little bit on whether or not I was going to share the full presentation. Sandy Lynn may have told me it was getting boring, but I think it's important for people who are entering into the conversation maybe for the first time to see where we have been in our planning that goes through. So I'll stop periodically, but this is a very similar presentation to what you have seen in the past. Again, our goal has always been to identify a process where we could clearly define what our current reality is to our desired results. None of us want these results, but making sure that that process was clear for all of our stakeholder groups. And again, this first started way back in January when I shared a version of this presentation. A couple of just opening comments. Foundationally, our perspective has and will continue to be for care, compassion, and concern for those people who are the most affected. This does mean that people are losing their jobs, and I wish I could say that that wasn't the case, but we have close to 30 staff members who will not be with us as a result of these difficult decisions that need to be made. We acknowledge that the work is messy and uncomfortable, and those outcomes, which I just talked about, are even more so. And as I've said over the last couple of Mondays, there's a lot of emotion in the room, myself included. I started grieving this on the evening of the election when we lost by that very close margin. And these are significant decisions that need to be made. At the same time, myself and the administrative team have accepted this as our reality and have vowed to do our best with our current situation. For those in the room, I'm oftentimes asked, how do we get through something like this? As you'll see, taking away close to 14% of our operating budget over 2 years. The question, my response is that we continue to as a staff, work through the New Prague Way, those tenets and those ideals that are so important to us. And as a community, I remind everyone that we're going to need your support more than ever. Our teachers, our students, our staff are going to need our community more than ever. A wise man once told me, it's not what you go through, it's how you go through it together. And so I know there's a lot of emotion. I acknowledge that in the room. I wish this wasn't the message that we were here to share and that you didn't have to make these decisions this evening, but it's our reality. We accept it, and I hope that as a result of this, we come out stronger than we did before. Again, I've asked the group to lead through this process. This process began back in December when we identified ways and how we could go about looking through and making these significant budget reductions. And so we do that by keeping our mission and our vision and really our strategic directions as our core tenets going forward. I won't read all of them, but as someone who's been a part of budget reductions in the past, the tendency is to revert back and to go back and to think about where we were. And I've continued to ask, and I've been impressed with the administrators on their ability to continue to look forward. Again, what I've said before and what I'll say again, what do we want from our students 5 to 10 years from now? Those students who maybe not even in our building yet. What do we need to do to make sure that we are meeting their needs? And again, we've identified as a group, you identified this prior to me coming on board this summer, those 4 most important things are in those strategic directions. Continuous improvement of student support systems, engage and communicate with all stakeholder groups, facilitate the continuous evolution of learning through curriculum standards and instructional practices, and evaluate and improve the district's operational systems. So what did we endeavor to do? We endeavored to make an audit of our system for areas where we could look for those reductions. But again, as we look forward, where does our system need to be enhanced? What else can we do, knowing that this can't just be taken away? We also have to look at how can we work together to be even more collaborative. And one of the I think nice benefits of our process is that I don't want to say it's brought synergy, because that sounds like these are positive discussions, but there's been a lot of cross collaboration between the different groups and different parties as to how we can become even more aligned and even more creative at times. We've talked about our current reality, 2 failed referendums, declining, albeit slightly declining enrollment. We have increase in expenses as we do personally. Inflation hits us, it also hits our system. We also have statewide factors, and these are the same factors that we shared over and over throughout the referendum campaign. Insufficient funding over the past decade and beyond. Yes, we did get a nice boost from the state in the last legislative session over the summer. I would make the case that that's insufficient if you look at the past decade and beyond. The average funding has been a little over 2% from the state each year. We have funded and partially funded mandates, and we have the rising cost of educating students in the 21st century. What does that mean? Technology, one-to-one technology that we know that we need for our students to be successful as we prepare them for 21st century skills. As we talked about in the referendum campaign as well, our local taxpayer contribution is at the bottom 4% in comparison to school districts throughout the state. There are 328. This fall, when we looked at that, we were 316th out of 328th in terms of the contribution that we receive from our local taxpayers. So, our current reality in numbers, $3.1 million cut last spring, difficult conversations. First time New Prague area schools had to make any budget reductions in 13 years. Most of those were due to declining enrollment. You didn't have to affect structures like we are having to do this year. We now have $3.5 million in reductions, which we will get into in more detail. If you do the math, that's 6.6 million of 48 million, 13.75%. I did a little math because we are still in a deficit mode, and if our projection is $2 million for next year, even if it's for $1 million, That's about 16% of our operating budget that we will have to look to take away. If it is indeed $2 million, which is something that we'll talk about going forward, that's close to 18% of our operating budget that we will have to move out of our system in order to have that balanced budget. So our timeline has been this. We're here tonight, and in more detail, you can see all of the different areas we're on track for. The last couple that I call out to everyone, the bottom is we will have some plans that need to be worked out as a result of these decisions. We know that and we acknowledge there is still work that needs to be done. But as a former building principal, I know that in the spring of the year, I was busy working on schedules, creating prep models, creating specialist models, putting students in classrooms or courses, all of those things. So those decisions need to be made, and that's natural, I believe, for building administrators to do, working collaboratively with staff and families when appropriate. We also know that the third from the bottom, staff placement. After tonight's decisions and discussions and then decisions, we know that there are going to be staff who are laid off. We've talked about that. We also know that there are going to be staff who are going to be bumped out of their current position and maybe moved to a different grade level or another building as a result of these discussions. We have a pretty good idea. I think the administrative team has a pretty good idea how that is going to play out. But again, we have not communicated those decisions. We won't do that until after spring break. It would be premature for us to do those things yet. So with board specific, if you remember way back in January, we started talking about a guiding change document, which helps give us some of the parameters in terms of, as we're going through this process, this administrative decision that we're going to give to you, recommend to the board to weigh in on. We've asked for you to think about, what do you want, what do we know about our current reality? What are desired outcomes? And is there anything that's off the table for consideration? So we looked at this as a board probably 2 different months. We had some input from administration as well, and I won't go through all of these things, but we defined our current reality as the why, right? In the middle, you see the unacceptable means. Fund balance was something that we talked about, and I'll reference that again in the presentation. And we didn't want reductions that were going to target a specific group or department, but this was not a cost-centered approach where I was saying to each department, you're going to cut 10% or you're going to cut 20%. We knew that we were going to have to affect structures. You see the results on the right-hand side. My right-hand side, I won't go through those with you at this point. I think it would be redundant, but I'd stop to take a drink of water to also see if you have any questions or comments. Going forward, again, this is the work that began way back in January. See the different groups that came together. There were 10 of them to really look at our system. And this wasn't anything special to New Prague. It really was how you organize a school district, all the different departments within a school district, and Sandy will get into more detail about each of these areas going forward. Again, strategic directions. This anchors us in our work. Our operating referendum failed, unfortunately, and there aren't any do-overs. I wish there was. But we said, why did we need this money? Our messages, I think, and I believe, have been pretty consistent along the way. Rising cost of inflation, unfunded and partially funded mandates, and the rising cost of educating 21st century students. How those dollars were to be used was here. And I won't go into each of these slides next, but this was, as you remember, this was a maintenance effort. We had lots of discussions this summer about, should we ask for money? How much should we ask? Should there be inflation? Should there not be inflation? Our end result was an ask of $450 per pupil, which was $19.29 per month for a family who had a home at $350,000. But it's hard to define because it's a maintenance request. It wasn't adding anything new to our program. It was maintaining the level of teaching that we had, the small classrooms that we had. It was maintaining the instructional supports, the academic and social emotional needs, and avoiding future budget reductions. And so when you get to this point, What does that mean? We know that we have been really fiscally responsible. We've kept our money in our classrooms, which I think is something that we should be very, very proud of. It also means that that's where our money is held. In order to then affect structurally our budget, we were going to need to look at those 5 bullets that you see below. Just a little bit more detail, again, from the referendum to paint a picture as to the story we've continued to tell and will continue to tell. And we pride ourselves on being very fiscally responsible, being conservative with taxpayer money, and the community has agreed to this. It's not just me saying this as the superintendent or Sandy coming up, Sandy Lynn, when she talks about operations, talks about finance. But our community told us this summer that 68% believe that we were had good financial management, and that 77% believe that we were spending money the way that where we should. And again, that's in our classrooms. And this slide is here because our whole campaign was based on celebrating the work of our teachers and our staff, and we wanted to be able to maintain that. We have been able to drive down costs, as you can see, whether it be administration or special education. When you look at New Prague on the left-hand side, the local average, which is not always a great average because there are size and scale differences between our local school districts. The comparable average, size and scale of school districts of about 4,000 students, and then statewide average that you go forward. So we have done a good job, and we should be proud of that. I argue that, and I'd say that it's our biggest strength. And now it's going to present ourselves as one of our biggest challenges. We will go to take another look to reduce $3.5 million from our operating budget. So just a little bit about the steps. Again, I know you have seen this, but people in the room may have not. We've anchored ourselves in the strategic plan. Right sizing of the budget is the words or is the terminology that I use to define what you did last year. I support everything that you did last year. You looked all around to find any money that you could take out that was as far away from the classroom as you possibly could, and those were the right and prudent decisions to make at that time. Unfortunately, you can't continue to do that when you're getting to the level of cut we are at, and so we needed to make proposed structural adjustments to our budget, all the while looking for areas where we can continue to right size our budget. So I came to you as a board knowing that in order to get to $3.5 million, we were going to need to affect things that were $500,000 or greater in order to get to that big number. And so about a month ago, we talked about transportation and operations. We talked about elementary class sizes and secondary program models, and we'll get into those in more detail coming up. Communication and when appropriate engagement has been a theme for us throughout this process. We've had our website that is available. There's an email that when someone sends us a note, we do our best to respond in a timely manner. We had staff and community engagement survey. We had, I believe, 72 responses for different things that we looked into that came to us. We also have last year's survey that we've looked at as we've tried to make and formulate these decisions. We've done our best to keep our staff abreast of what's going on. And so we did presentations the first round, the first week in February. We did another round of presentations this month when we talked about the specific reductions. And then we've had community engagement or opportunities for for the community to hear what's going on and where we're at in the process, especially the February dates, and in March, more specific detail as to where we are at with our reductions. That's a little bit more about the stakeholder survey, suggestions, comments, concerns, questions, and even a few compliments. And then to the fund balance. We had a healthy discussion in this group about a month ago about whether to borrow $250,000. We knew that if we borrowed that money, we would have to repay it. This wasn't a loan. This was a loan that was going to need to be repaid. We've taken you up on that offer to borrow $250,000, knowing that that's money that we need to repay at some point. And so our reduction is not 3.5, it's probably closer to $3.24 million, which you will see, which you've seen once and you'll see again. There are some things that need to happen as a result of this, and before I turn it over to Sandy Lynn, again, this is a work in progress, and so she'll talk about some enhancements. I would offer up a couple of other enhancements that we know need some work as a result of the decisions that you will weigh in on a little bit. We are reducing, a proposal is to reduce one of the elementary physical education teachers. And so as a result of that does cut the number of days that students will experience Phi-Ed. And so as a result of that, my understanding is a couple of years ago, they did some work with unpacking or bundling, I think was a term that was used here. I'm not familiar with that term. I'm familiar with the term unpacking, so I'll use that instead. But we're going to need to figure out what it's like to meet those standards, knowing that there are less days. That is something that's work that will need to be done and work that can start right after spring break if indeed that is a reduction. I also recognize and I fully support the need for movement and wellness in our schools. It's something that is central to me personally and professionally. And so if we do move away from the number of Phi-Ed experiences, I think it's prudent for us to think about bringing a group of people together, teachers, community, administrators, Phi-Ed teachers, to talk about how we can continue to promote movement, wellness in our elementary school setting. It doesn't need to be just elementary schools, but I do think that's a discussion that needs to be had, and bringing creative minds together to talk about that. One of the other things that I would like to initiate, and we will initiate as a result of this, a little point of reference, as a part of last year's reductions, $90,000 were taken out. Site leadership teams were eliminated, and it was hoping to be a one-time reduction that would be brought back. I would like to identify a structure working with our administrators, teacher leaders, and to identify what a leadership structure should look like for the New Prague area schools globally, but then also how do we create and embed leadership teams at our sites. I don't expect that will take place until the fall of '25, but as someone who believes pretty strongly in creating and cultivating teacher leadership and teacher voice, I believe that's something that needs to be done going forward, because we're going to need to stay very engaged with our teachers throughout this process and beyond. And lastly, though we have a wealth of knowledge in Sandy Lynn, I want people to learn from Sandy and others as much as we possibly can. One of the other enhancements that I would propose, and we have a couple of ideas of what that could look like, is more New Prague area schools specific finance, education, and engagement. This is not a problem this is not a one-time problem for us as a school district. I wish it was. But as we'll talk about in a little bit, this could be an ongoing problem for us. And then the best way for us to deal with that is to engage our community so they understand the work that we are doing, why we are making some of the decisions, and when appropriate, give us some feedback and input into what those decisions might be. So if you were to act on the recommendations, this would be work that we would start, not all of it right away after spring break, but one of my tasks even this week is to think about a 60 to 90 day plan about post planning for success and what that looks like and how we continue to go forward as an organization. Again, here, I offer this up one more time. This is a work in progress. It still is. I would expect that there are some decisions after tonight's meeting. There will be other work that needs to be done, whether it be placement of staff, but also finalizing those plans. It's a lot of work that went into getting to this point, and it's natural for school communities and principals and teachers to be finalizing those plans based on configurations, whether it's hiring, whether it's welcoming new staff into the building, whether if it's identifying different schedules based on the number of specialists they have or the number of sections that they have at each grade level. That work will continue in earnest after we get back from spring break. Again, I'll close in just a second, but just some guiding principles that I think it's important for everyone to recognize. We have done our best to communicate and, when appropriate, engage throughout this process. This isn't a message that I want to share, nor is it a message that you want to hear, nor it is a message that the community wants us to act on, I don't believe. But knowing that communication breeds trust, we've done our best to try to communicate and be as clear with this process as we possibly can. All the while, having care, compassion, and concern for those people who are the most impacted. As a former building principal, I felt very strongly that if I had to lay somebody off, that they were going to hear that from me first and directly from me, and they would have time to grieve that. I want that same respect for our principals and the staff that they have to deliver this difficult news to. That's number 3. Number 2, we continue to need to be forward-thinking and be strategic with regards to, though people are going to be affected, positions and programs that are going to position our school district to be successful going forward. And though I would like to have not had to finish this process, there were many times I would not have wanted to do this to get to that end product. We know, and I'm grateful for the work that people have done behind the scenes to get to this point in the process, albeit very challenging work for everyone involved. And lastly, I'll say this to the community again and to our staff. How do we get through this? We get through this by buckling down on the New Prague way. Doing what's right, committing to excellence, and showing people that we care. And I've said now in multiple settings, and I'll say again, our school district is hurting right now. And we need their support. We need the support from the community more than ever. And this isn't about me. This isn't about the people who will continue to be here next year, first and foremost. This is about the people who are probably watching from afar and realizing that their time with our great school district is going to come to an end at some point because of these difficult decisions that we needed to make, because of our reality, not because we wanted to have to make these decisions. So I'm going to turn it over to Sandy, who's going to get into more detail, but if anybody has any questions for me, I can take them now or after her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Good evening. This is basically there's not much change from the presentation I gave at the work session, but I will go over all this in detail again, and we'll take questions throughout or at the end. There's also, for the public, there's a detailed list posted to board docs, an Excel spreadsheet that goes through each cut and what that dollar amount was. So, and the school board members would have that available in board docs as well. So as Andy talked about our current reality, we just need to remind everybody that we have a declining and low fund balance. While it's still going to end up at our goal of 8%, it's still that's still relatively low. But the board goal is 8%, and we will maintain that. We have declining enrollment projections. I'll go over some data about that in a few minutes. And then we have financial projections that are showing expenses increasing faster than revenue, and mainly due to declining enrollment. Here's our fund balance history going back to fiscal year 17-18. The blue line is the total and the red line is the unassigned. And as you can see, the second from the right, we will end up the year at about 3.6 million unassigned. And that is right about that 8% mark. And our 8% goal is 3.6 million, so we're going to come right in at that 8% goal. But you can see the decrease, and especially the large decrease after COVID, which is really was the turning point for the district. Kindergarten projections, as you can see in 1920, we had the highest kindergarten at 323. 2021, which was the year of the blended learning and distance learning, we went down to 232. We rebounded nicely the next year at 292, but it has been dropping since then. And based on Scott County births, it will continue at that lower level, at least for the next few years. This is the total K-12 enrollment. You can see again in 1920, we were at our highest at 4,227. This year, we're going to end up around 3,930, and pretty much a continuous decline until 2930, which again is quite a ways out, but we'd be down to less than 3,500 students if these projections hold true. One of the key reasons of the declining enrollment is the incoming K class is smaller than the graduating class. And so this is just a structural imbalance that will continue into the future unless our kindergarten numbers increase. And so this year, for example, we'll graduate about 300 seniors, and we'll have about 250 incoming K. So that's a structural balance of almost 50 students. When I presented information to the board in February about how much the budget reduction goal is going to be, I talked about just the financial changes from 23-24 this year to next year. And revenue is projected to decrease almost 1%, primarily due to loss of enrollment, but there was also a one-time rebate from workers' comp for almost $300,000 that will not be repeated next year. And expenses are projected to increase approximately 7%. So salary and benefit settlements are backloaded, so we could lower expenses in 23-24. That means increases in 24-25 are going to be higher. We also reinstated some one-time reductions that accounts for about 1% of that increase, and then other expenses are increasing due to inflation. And all of these factors create a large deficit projection for next year, and that's why the 3.5 million. A look into 25-26, we're still showing a decrease in students. My projection shows 88 student decrease. Overall revenue would anticipate to increase 1%, even though the gen ed formula is 2 or 2.2 or 2.15. That 88 lower students offsets that, and that's why it's only 1%. And expenses will grow more than 1%. And so if there's no additional revenue, it will result in more budget reductions. The key factors, however, are enrollment. Obviously, if our enrollment comes in better than planned, that will help that. Inflation, inflation has come down at a high level. I mean, the prices are at a high level, but at least it's not increasing as much as it was. And real key is going to be the 25-27 salary and benefits settlements, because at the end of 25, we'll be entering into a new contract with all the groups starting in 25. And we also have a lot of technology infrastructure upgrades that we are looking at that are needed. We're able to hold off on those, but at some point we can't hold off anymore, and we'll have to do that. It takes a lot to run this wireless network, and it's expensive. Okay, programming will change as a result of these adjustments. Declining enrollment that we have right now, some enhanced programming that we've had for many, many years will need to be curtailed or eliminated, unfortunately. And these changes will impact staff, students, and families in a variety of ways. One thing we tried to do during the budget adjustment process is be cautious about reducing programs that make the district less competitive. The ones that come to mind are college and schools, some of those types of classes, the MARS program that really keep students in our district as opposed to going PSCO or somewhere else. Here's a reminder of the class size targets. The current guidelines are in for 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Middle school class, that will depend on the cohort size moving through. Obviously our class sizes vary just by year. And high school will be 30 plus, although some electives may run lower. We offer a wide variety of electives, and sometimes we have to, if a class doesn't go, then we have to find somewhere else to put those students. If we can't, sometimes we run those classes lower. We also have some limits due to safety, such as shop classes, and college and schools. At times they have limits as to how many students can be in a class. So steps not taken last year that we talked about a lot last year, this time of the year. Middle school model, transportation changes which will result in longer bus rides and more walkers, elementary specialists, and elementary intervention. So all of those were talked about last year during our right sizing stage 1, and these will definitely have an impact this year. So the board approved a $3.5 million target in February. We are taking advantage of $250,000 of the fund balance. Our preliminary reductions are $3,368,700. Our enhancements proposed would be $127,000. So our net recommendation is $3,241,700, which is slightly above the target, and the total FTE impact is 29.7. Okay, I gotta take a drink. Any questions so far? So I'll go through these by area. The different groups were in one of Andy's slides that he presented earlier. So first is administration and district office. We're gonna do quite a bit with chargebacks. We do try to keep, there's limits as to how many chargebacks we can do. A chargeback is when you take unassigned general operating expenses and move them to a restricted fund. And there are limits as to how much we can do that. There's also limited funds in some of those, restricted funds. So I move people back and forth depending upon how much we have as a balance. And so it's more of an art almost than a black and white, but I will also increase chargeback to Community Services Fund as a result of the reductions they were able to bring forward. We're going to start a chargeback to the self-funded insurance plan. This is, again, we're limited as to how much we can. Most districts don't do that, I found out, but some districts do, and so I feel comfortable doing that. Decrease in marketing professional services, a change of coding for special ed staff to generate more revenue, eliminating the assistant AD position. And just want to note that various district administrators have absorbed duties in the past and will absorb some duties this year, such as mentorship, gifted and talented, and duties related to our strategic direction number 2, communication, which is a focus for us over the coming years. And this savings results in $312,400. Athletics and activities, we did decide to keep the remainder of middle school activities. That was a pretty big discussion, and we did decide to keep that, but we're going to be reducing some supplies and activity workers for those sports. We're going to increase activity fees for all activities, eliminate the fall cheer team, eliminate a couple of coaches, and implement music and band activity fees at the high school and increase them at the middle school. And that results in just over $103,000. Community services, they were able to restructure the child care programs to reduce staff and downgrade the paper for community ed catalogs, and this will allow an increase of $50,000 to charge back from the general fund. Things that aren't associated with the chargeback is an increase in facility rental fees by 10%. This will require a board-approved policy change in the fall. Increase FAC membership fees. We haven't increased them in a while. This obviously has to go through the Joint Powers Board. And continue middle school programming at the FAC. So instead of having as many sports, we offered a program last year where they could pay a fee and have some structured play in the CEC gym right after school is out. And that savings is $24,500. Early learning, we're decreasing a para. We're also decreasing early learning transportation. However, we are keeping the transportation to the nature-based preschool because that is pretty key for us. We want to keep offering that program. And these two changes will allow a $15,000 increase chargeback from the general fund. Moving on to elementary, 9.0 FTE, 3 physical education teachers. Again, due to lower enrollment, we have fewer sections to service, and that results in a decreased need for specialists. 6.0 classroom, we would have, I'm keeping kind of 2 sheets right now. I keep one based on our current class size guidelines and one based on the future. Next year, just based on our current guidelines, we would have reduced 3.0 FTE teachers due to lower enrollment. So really, the class size decrease was 3.0 FTE. And then reduced building supplies, a total savings of almost $734,000, and an enhancement that I'll talk about in a little bit as a district-wide DAPE teacher. High school CLC, 3.85 FTE licensed staff, 1 clerical, a reduction in building allocation, not paying for lease costs for our MARS programs, and then increasing parking fees, a total of $392,000. Middle school, 8.0 FTE licensed staff, reduction due to the model changing, a para lunch supervisor, again, due to the model changing, a 0.25 clerical, 10% reduction in building allocation, and we pay a little extra for middle school DAPE, so that would go away with our district-wide DAPE, a total savings of almost $676,000. Special services and MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, reducing 3 elementary interventionists. We currently have 2 at each elementary. We'll go down to 1. Total savings of $240,000. We have one enhancement here, an ADSYS grant for behavioral intervention at the elementary level. This allows us to receive some reimbursement on these expenses the year after we implement them. So for next year, we won't get any aid, but the following year, we will get part of that back.
Sandy, can I ask you, is that an ongoing thing then afterwards?
Yeah,
You'll
I
get
mean, we
that-
still have to keep applying, but districts, once they have an ADSYS program, it doesn't
Doesn't
go
go
away.
away. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
there's
you.
a standing appropriation for it, and I don't see that going away.
Okay, thank you.
Technology, we're going to eliminate a paid cyber training subscription. We found a free one we can use. I think the paid one that we had this year was well worth it. It did some great education. I don't know if any board members clicked on anything they shouldn't have, but if you do, you get this instant email and you got to do training. So it was a really good program, but, and we've made a lot of progress in that area. Replacing grades 2 to 4 Chromebook with half-class sets, delaying the purchase of 2 servers and network storage, and canceling several classroom subscriptions, which totaled $2,025, a total savings of $125,000. An enhancement would be toolkits for high school students for repairing Chromebooks for school credit. Craig talked to me one day last week, we might be having those donated by a vendor, which would be very nice. Transportation and operations, a reduction of 3 routes by increasing ride times, reduction of 1 route by removing hazards from the policy, and both of these will require a policy change approved by the board this summer. A 1.0 custodian, skipping 1 year of gym floor refinishing, charging back a little more staff time to LTFM, and a clerical reduction from a 260-day contract to a 227-day contract, and that is a total of $841,700. A summary of the enhancements, a 1.0 DAPE. That would be district-wide. Behavioral interventionists at elementary, which is going to be partially funded with ADSYS aid. And then the toolkits, a total enhancements right now of $207,000. Next steps, meetings with affected staff that will not have a position. They were notified last week on Wednesday or Thursday. And we'll be having, obviously staff meetings in the buildings. Oh, I should have changed this slide. This was from that. Great, Sandy. Okay, so staff placements in April and May. I know a lot of the principals have already started that placement process, and hopefully that at least initial placement can start happening after spring break. Today is the final recommendations. May 28th will be the preliminary budget presentation to the board, and then June 24th will be the final budget approval by the board. Just a future look, some things that we've talked pretty vigorously about at times. So some options for next year would be middle school and high school model change, maybe from a 7-period to a 6-period day, increasing walking distances. Right now, they could go higher. Middle school activities, elementary intervention and class sizes, and lastly, 5th grade band. So that is a summary of all the changes. You have the detailed list, the Excel spreadsheet, and I'll take any questions that you might have.
If we're looking for increasing walking distances perhaps for next year as a possible thing for next year, we would then have to approve a new policy, because the one we're asking for this one is in our policy now. Okay, thank you.
Yes. And there is a maximum for state law as well,
Okay.
that we have to follow under.
Sandy, what you presented just now has basically been in the works for the past 2 weeks now. Is that correct? There hasn't been any major changes from what we were presented with 2 weeks ago?
No, there have been no changes. Any other questions?
No, thank you. So I guess I would like to dig into a little more details regarding and just get some more clarification on some of the specialist roles. So I know that you'd mentioned, and I think it's more for the purposes of, I mean, I've been so closely involved in this, so I feel like I've had a lot of conversation regarding this, but not everybody has been privy to those conversations. So when we talk about the specialists and why we're reducing in a particular area, and we've mentioned like enrollment loss versus program reduction. Can you speak to, maybe this is a question for Mr. Volmuth versus Sandy, but can you speak to like to the sections, we're reducing down to so many sections within the elementary class, and how does that match up, and at what level are we at with the specialists before and now then after? Because I think that's helpful to talk about that.
Yeah, so when we look through this process and the principals went through this process, one of the things that we talked about is right sizing the budget. So last year, a lot of the reductions were based on enrollment, and so our programs that we offer. So we've had some good debates whether this is a programmatic change or an enrollment adjustment, and I would make the case that all of our programs are based on our enrollment. And so if our enrollment is trending up and there's money in the system, we can have more programs. We are not in that situation. We're in a situation where I think it's very fair and real for us to think about what our programs look like with 3,500 kids rather than 4,000 kids. And so when we look at the number of sections that we have at our elementary schools currently, and Sandy might help me with this, we have 73 sections. 5 specialists at a site allows for 30 sections of individual sites at a section. So that would be 90 total. Now, specialists can do other things during those times in addition to providing their prep. They do, but we have to make a decision based on is it increased class sizes? Is it the walking distance that we referenced? So I think it's currently 73 sections. Is that right? Next year we go down to 67 sections in our building. And if those numbers, and that's across our 3 buildings, so they vary a little bit. So if you have 4 specialists, that's enough for 24 classrooms that you would provide a prep for. Now, that's not completely that way, but that's generally the way you think of that. And so as our enrollment goes down, our sections go down, then we have to look at the programs that we have. So we all value, I've said this over and over, physical education and movement. It's something that is central to who I am personally and professionally. But it's been, as Sandy referenced, a great enhancement that we have been able to provide our students. But at this point, our recommendation is that we can no longer provide that enhancement without affecting other things to get to that point. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So on the specialist side, with reducing the physical education, when we started talking about that, one of my biggest concerns was replacing it with other movement. And I haven't gotten a very warm and fuzzy feeling that we have a structured way to do that. To me, structure requires a location. It requires a pre-planned item for people to be doing that wouldn't fall on the teachers and things like that. And so I've heard a little bit of talk in various ways about how that may happen. Is there any commitment for number of minutes per day, per week, or anything like that, that those types of replacements for some of the lost physical activity are thought to be possible or attainable for us if we adjust plans?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it in terms of the number of minutes that we would dedicate to it. I mean, I just haven't given it that thought, but what I shared in my presentation, one of those enhancements that isn't on this presentation, is that's when I think we need to get our principals, our Phi Ed teachers, our teachers, even members of our community, as I've been sitting here tonight, thinking about how we partner with some of our community organizations in order to think about structures in our building, whether it's the recess time that we dedicate. And I know as a principal that's hard to affect, or whether it's a second recess, or whether that is movement types of things. I would have to rely on the professionals within the building to give us some guidance on what that would look like. But that would be something that we would try to do after spring break. So I can tell you that's something we will look at. I can't tell you if it would be X number of minutes. I haven't thought to that level of detail.
That puts me in a little bit of a conundrum, because at the end of the day, if we make cuts, those are happening now, and the mitigations of the effects of the cuts are important to me to have some level of commitment and clear-eyed to make sure that we're not, the physical activity, the mental benefits, the health benefits, the less squirminess benefits in classroom, all of that can combine, and I think there's some potential to gain some of that back, and perhaps in a more cost-effective way get more of it. But it's really hard to say let's make this first structural change without knowing that the mitigation is going to for sure be in effect. With just it might be, it makes it a lot harder.
I think that's fair. And so I would say two things to that. I would not expect it to be a one-to-one replacement. I don't know if that's realistic for us to do a one-to-one replacement. I'm just going to be very honest with where we're at. I wish it was, but again, we're cutting positions. We're asking more of our teachers, our classroom teachers as well. But I would go back to the visual that I've shared with you over the last 3 months that talks about 24-25 planning and beyond. Some of these things now need to be decided. If the board acts on the recommendation as it stands, then our energies go into trying to find ways to be creative about movement. And I would say not just movement, but movement and wellness in all of our buildings. And so that begins in earnest. So I would say at this point, up until this point, Mr. Call, our work has been identifying what reductions could be as we get feedback, trying to think win-win as much as possible. I've spent significant time at the end of last week trying to find other ways to do these things. As we get feedback from staff and stakeholders, at this point, our process now would be to be creative about what we could do to mitigate the loss of those physical education minutes.
And I don't think it's any different than the reduction of our interventionist, right? I mean, so at this point, we would be giving the approval to reduce our interventionists by 1 per building. How these teachers, the remaining interventionists, are going to handle their workload and what we're going to be doing with kids afterwards is still something we don't have determined at this point. And I think they'll put heads together and try to figure out how to get there.
I would, if I may,
Yeah.
I would say the middle school model is a prime example of that. Probably the biggest impact, and I don't want to quantify them, but if the number of FTEs that we look at is going to happen at the middle school, and if we think about, as a former middle school principal, the loss of staff to students, so those opportunities to create those relationships, which are critical for all of our students, but especially our adolescent learners. There's a lot of work that needs to be done as a result of this, and I think some of that work has started. But again, in earnest after spring break, that's where our energies would go.
So I guess what I'm hearing is we can't get a commitment of what it may be, like minutes or where it's going to be, but we can get a commitment that there's going to be a team of people that will be committed to finding some type of replacement or enhancement to try to make sure that is happening within our school district.
That's my goal.
Okay.
I think that includes everything across the board. Everyone is going to have to be, putting on their thinking caps and thinking about, okay, how are we going to do this now? It's going to be clerical people. It's going to be people who have kids who used to ride the bus and now can't ride the bus. Everybody's going to have to figure that out. That just has to come. It has to, no matter what.
Andy, I have a question for you regarding the chargeback to the healthcare. I know this is kind of a boring topic, but is that going to increase premiums and things like that eventually? Because that's going to increase the cost of the pool, correct?
Yeah, it will increase the cost of the pool, for sure. I mean, we have $6 or $7 million in claims, so $20,000 isn't significant.
Sure.
But yes.
But it's the cost of the operating the healthcare fund as
Yes.
a whole. Okay.
Yep.
So one of the other areas that I have questions on, as far as in the future look, we're talking about middle school and high school model changes into the future. Out of curiosity, about how big of an impact is the next model change at the middle school specifically as well?
I don't want to guess. I think that some folks have taken a look at that. I don't think it's significant, but it definitely would be more staff. I don't want to guess, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot to of things they've told me, because they haven't really studied it in depth.
As if I may, as we talked about, we're offering these up because we did not propose and we did not get into a discussion about what the 7-period model could look like if we went away from it at the high school. That's something that we will start to look at. Again, both the middle school model and the high school model. The high school model is a big topic that has a significant impact on electives. And so we will want to bring that to you earlier on in the process to decide structurally, like we did with class sizes, like we did with transportation, is that something that you can get behind as the board who represents the greater community. So I think we've gotten some initial thoughts, but I would hesitate to throw a number out. But I'll be very honest with you, it's not near the savings that you see for the middle school model in particular, 8 FTE. It's not close to 8 FTE to get to the 6-period day at the middle school.
Yeah, and the other big area of concern I have about how we're running it, if we do a model change this year, and then we're still $2 million short next year, and we do another model change, I think that delays us significantly in getting back into a routine or a consistent structure. And so, like, delaying, whether it's a walking distance change, delaying model change, especially where I think it's going to be lower impact. It's going to be a huge change in the middle school already, and so if we finish the amount of change we think we're going to need, I think that gives us a lot of advantage to just change once. The year after year of change, and every change we make now gives us less change that we have to make into the future, and it helps. It snowballs. Not cutting snowballs into the future and requires larger cuts. Cutting earlier also has the same effect, where we require less and less cuts going into the future. And so that concerns. That concerns me, that we're going to get into this habit of making pretty substantial changes every year as we hold off.
If I may, I will tell you that's one of the things we talked about a lot. Should we just continue to cut and cut and cut to the point? And we made a decision at one point to not make symbolic cuts, to not make cuts just that we're going to show the community we're frustrated, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. It's what the question is, and I said this before, it's not a question of what the best program is, and we'll use the middle school model as the example. I wish we were able to entertain that discussion. The discussion for us at this point, at this particular time, based on the information that we have right now, is what is the best model we can afford in the new Prague area schools in our middle school. And we believe the best model that we can afford in the New Prague area schools in March of 2024 with the information that we have is a 7-period day. And so that's where we're going to land. That's where we landed. But yes, Mr. Call, we did have extensive discussions about, should we just do it all now? Should we just rip the Band-Aid off with transportation? Should we just rip the Band-Aid off with the middle school model? Should we just rip the Band-Aid off with elementary school class sizes? And instead of doing that, we've decided to provide the best programs that we can based on the resources that we have right now.
With this budget projection, outside of reducing classes for lower enrollment next year, do we anticipate that we have to cut again next year outside of reduced enrollment items?
Yes, I think, again, a lot is dependent on salary and benefit settlements, enrollment. We will, just looking at next year's elementary, for example, we'll be losing a large 5th grade and coming into a lower kindergarten. That will probably reduce 3 sections if that holds true. So there are some cuts that will be natural, and there may be some more cuts. Yes.
Not to go back and say one more thing, but another thing, that the information that we have, I believe firmly that collective bargaining agreements, contracts, and budgets are based on the best that people could do at that particular time. Are they perfect? No. But are they the best that people can do at that particular time? And a CBA has developed years and it's collectively bargained, and so too is a budget. We got to remember, in the middle of this process, we're watching what's happening in St. Paul with the legislation very, very carefully. And Sandy can describe this much better. There was a potential for more money coming to schools because of the significant state surplus. I don't believe that is going to take place, but as we watch those things that are taking place outside that we don't have control of, that would have an impact on the types of programs we were able to provide, and these decisions were made over the last several months leading up to this. So I just add that as another piece of things that we discussed as we go forward.
Getting to your thoughts about bigger cuts now rather than making other cuts in the future, I guess I prefer doing it like we're doing it right now, using a scalpel rather than a butcher knife. I would like to see us be prudent. It's hurting enough the way it is. To make it really tough now and take away even more programs, cut back even more now, it might prevent us from having to do it next year, but it's not what I prefer to do, and as a board member, and I don't think our students deserve to have that at this time either. I think if we have to do it in the future, we'll have to do it in the future, but right now, this will make us float. It'll take care of our needs. It'll make our cuts that we have to make, but it won't gut us.
Any additional comments or questions from any other board members?
I guess I would agree with Denny in that I want to give our kids as much of the best that we can afford right now. And if we have to cut next year, then we have to cut next year, but at least we'll have them an extra year that we've been giving them more. And I think at this point, the more we can give them under our present budget concerns, the better off everyone will be.
And I agree in many regards. I would just suggest that the time for the scalpel was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And as our fund balance has gone down and down and down, we were unwilling to do cuts. Last year we did 3.1 million cuts, hardly any of which were structural. We were unwilling to do transportation last year, and that was still 3 million. And so I think, just as humans, we have a tendency to try to avoid hard decisions, and me personally, if I'm going to get punched in the face, I like to get just punched in the face once. I don't need to do it every week or every year, and so I think it can be very bad for morale as well to go through this cycle year after year after year, reducing services, and services we keep today, they'll come at a cost of higher budget cuts to the kindergarten class that's coming in and things like that. So it's not like we actually, it's always trade-offs. If we spend here today, there's going to be less to spend in the future, and our structure is going to be harder in the future. That will affect other students, and that's the thing that concerns me most.
No, and I hear you. I mean, I do hear you, Dan, because I think fundamentally, as we go through this budget, and we have gone through this budget, I've had the same question. I mean, are we doing enough, or should we do more, right? Do we do more now? And there's discussions I've had with superintendent and administration, and I do think we are making the right decision now with what we know today, just because, again, we don't know where revenue is going to be at next year for sure. So to overcut now and to go too far in to cause more damage there's a risk there too. But I think there's a risk either direction. And I think, as we've gone into structural things this time around, I do think that we're going to have to do a lot more contractual adjustments, next time around as well. So I think we were able to spare that this time around when it came to contract negotiations and things like that. But I do think as we move forward, we're going to have to change. We're going to have to look at education and as the system as a whole, and how can we do things differently in a less costly way. The way we are running our current system under the current structure, we can't afford. At the end of the day, if we're not going to get any additional revenue, we're going forward. We're going to have to make adjustments to right-size this operation, because where we're at right now, it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be year after year to do that. So, that's.
I would just echo. I think that we struggled with that balance between cutting, as going as deep as we could, and then the impact on morale, initial and long term. Trust me, we had many discussions about that very same thing. I will also say we also talked about the competitiveness of our school district, and people would say to me, if you do this, this will happen. And I got to a point, and I think Sandy is sick of me saying this, but there's something in this that nobody is going to like, and it may cost students. And so how do we balance that as we go forward? I will also say I think it becomes imperative for us to find different ways to bring revenue into our operating budget. If it's not going to be from a referendum, then things like ADSIS and an ongoing partnership with ADSIS, which I sometimes will refer to as a grant, but I think it's a state-funded grant that has been in existence for 15 plus years, and I don't see it going away. To me, that is an opportunity for us to not only bring in something else to our system, but if at chance, and we're at having this discussion again a year from now, being creative about how we can maintain intervention programs for our students. And so that is the work that is yet to come. I don't have an answer on what it's going to look like, but we've had at least initial discussions again today, no, this isn't the first time, about how we can become a leaner organization and still maintain high quality programming for all of our students.
All right.
I want to remind ourselves as well, and you, Dan, that we came within 36 votes of making the right decision. We missed it by a hair, and if we had not missed it by that small amount, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about these cuts that we have to make at all. So to put down what decisions might have been made in the past as being stupid decisions or ones that were not without good forethought or whatever have you, I think we came doggone close to making the right decision, but it just didn't quite work out.
And that's one thing I've noticed at the highest funded school districts in the state of Minnesota and the lowest funded school districts in the state of Minnesota. Our funding levels aren't correlated with outcomes of students, and so the highest fund you can't tie numbers of dollars spent to the outcomes of students, and no school district in the state of Minnesota has made fundamental changes to the unaffordability of education and the amount of money we're spending until forced to by just downright lack of funds. That's true in every single school district across the state. And so the trends have been happening for a very long time, and education hasn't been adjusting in any meaningful ways. And so we all just keep doing the same things, and our test scores have been suffering. We're spending more money than ever on education, and we're not seeing the outcomes on the other side. And so that indicates clearly that there's something broken. And if we keep doing the same thing, we'll keep having the same outcomes and the same problems we're having. And that's why we have to change. And we have to find the things that are the most important for outcomes, focus on those, and we have to avoid bringing in all the other stuff that distracts from the core education mission. And that's one thing education has really struggled with, is we bring more and more into the walls of the education, and it dilutes our ability to focus on the things that we actually have the best opportunity to make the most positive impact as we do it.
All right, thank you. All right, so at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve the budget reductions.
I so move.
Second.
Been first and seconded. I'd like to go around to the table for any last remarks. You don't have to have one, just want to make sure everybody had a chance to speak. So, Denny?
It's not what I would hope that we'd have to do, but we have to do it, so yes.
Okay. Karen?
I'm going to echo what I said a lot through this whole process, is that this is a horrible situation, but I do, the process that admin took to put this together, I think was the best possible way that it could have been done.
Jean?
It's a difficult time for me to come in. And I'm so grateful for our kids. They're the reason why we have our jobs. Your response, as us adults, will be imperative to the success of our district. This is likely the highest pressured decision I've ever had to make. And none of us, I don't think, take it lightly. I'm supporting it because I don't feel that we have another best option. And I'm sorry.
Mark?
I agree with what Karen said.
Okay.
I think Denny and Karen and Jean all say kind of what I would echo to say in this situation. It's not easy, it's not fun, and it's not something you want to do, but yes.
Dan?
So my concerns remain optimizing for the most important things. I think we could benefit from some enhancements of reevaluating what we think the most important fundamentals of elementary education, middle school education, and high school education are. Our number one request from the community, at least in the emails I got, was on physical education and activity. Without a clear commitment that we can make to the community, that's a really hard one for me to get behind. And so, and then the second highest one I saw was administrative. And so those are the two things that I think are missing from our proposal that were the most asked for from the community.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I had a number of communications about maintaining arts, not just Fayed. Actually, I had more community communication about the arts and music and drama and all that kind of stuff than I had about Fayed.
All right. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 6-1.
No against everything.
I don't vote no against everything, Mark, but you can look at the minutes if you're interested.
All right. Next on the action items are the resolution to accept a donation from McDonald's.
At this time, I'll consider a motion to look at the resolution to accept the donation from McDonald's.
So moved.
Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to consider the following resolution. Whereas the school board may accept the gift valued at $1,000 or more only by adoption of a resolution by 2/3 of its members, and whereas the Choate Company McDonald's wishes to donate $5,000 to the Falcon Ridge Elementary School, now therefore be it resolved, the New Prague Area School Board of Education will accept the donation under no conditions. How do you vote on this resolution, Dan?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Jean? Kim? Dennis? Yes.
Yes.
Oh, did you? I thought you did, but.
I say yes.
Item passes 7-0.
All right, next, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I have another resolution, and this one is to accept blankets from the Shakopee Mdewakan Sioux tribe. And when I saw this resolution, I go, geez, I'm going to have some further information from this, for this resolution. And it turned out to be that we have that. They wrote a nice little paragraph that I can share with all of us on what they're donating. New Prague Area Schools has received a generous donation of 6 eighth-generation blankets from the Shakopee Mdewakan Sioux community. The 8th generation is a reference to the values of the 7 generations, which means we as a people consider the impact of our decisions on the next 7 generations. Blankets are gifted to honor Native people for various accomplishments in their lives. One of these accomplishments is given to high school students when they graduate from high school. This will be the first time in New Prague schools that the Native graduates will receive an 8th generation blanket and feather at the feather ceremony that will be hosted through the Native programs. So that is the source of the reason that the tribe is giving us this this donation. So at this time, I'll consider a motion to accept this resolution.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll consider the following resolution. Whereas the school board may accept the gift valued at $1,000 or more only by adoption of a resolution by 2/3 of its members, and whereas the Shakopee Mdewakan Sioux community wishes to donate 6 eighth-generation blankets valued at $1,100 to the New Prague area schools. Now therefore be it resolved by the New Prague Area School Board of Education that they shall accept the donation under, I cannot say under no conditions, because there are conditions that they have obviously set forth for themselves. How do you vote on this?
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Dennis, yes. Item passes 7-0.
All right, then we have the New Prague Area Education Foundation grant approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the grant.
So moved.
And first and second, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carries 7-0. And then last on the agenda is consent agenda item that was removed, policy 527, regarding student use of and parking of motor vehicles, patrols and inspections and searches. I would entertain a motion to approve this policy.
So moved.
Second.
And first and seconded, any discussion?
I've
Yeah.
got a statement.
Fine.
The Section 3D definition of the school district location, combined with Section 6, with Article 6, Section B, claim the ability to search vehicles without consent or warrant, both on and off district policy. The justification for these extraordinary powers is the assertion that the courts allow it and the claim that it will give the district the tools needed to protect our students. I want to address each of these issues. First, the courts allow and endorse actions every day that are harmful to individuals and in many cases deprive them of their constitutional rights. We always make a mistake when we draw the moral line of what is allowed by the courts and what is right. Every widespread violation of constitutional protections and natural law that have occurred in the history of our nation were done with the endorsement of our courts. Secondly, the appeal to fear as a reason to claim such expansive power is a reasoning every government has used to expand its power and authority at the expense of the individual. I cannot imagine a scenario where searching a vehicle on or off school property is going to change the outcome of a dangerous situation. Our policy, when faced with a threat or a crime, can and should aggressively pursue safety without trampling the guardrails of our Constitution. This can be done with the following when a potential threat is identified. First, find the people involved and prevent them from taking dangerous action. 2, find the vehicles involved and prevent people from accessing or moving them. 3, work with law enforcement to get a warrant. And then 4, search the vehicle. If these steps are not possible, the situation is not the type where a search is going to be conducted and the appropriate response lies elsewhere. I invite the board to reconsider this policy and voluntarily limit the boundaries we claim authority over.
And I'd love to be able to say at a different time in our history, I might agree with you, with the current type of things that are going on at schools with shootings and all sorts of difficult things that would endanger us all to make when there is a chance of students being harmed.
Can you explain to me, Dennis, a set of scenarios where a student has access to a vehicle, where a law enforcement officer or whatnot couldn't intervene if there was an imminent threat?
I can't.
Okay, thought so.
All right, any other comments?
I totally agree with what Dennis just said.
Okay. All right, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 6-1. I would then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
First and second, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.